The Apache girl slept in the snow without a fire and taught the rancher how to survive the cold. The sun had barely risen over the snow-covered plains when the rancher stepped outside his small wooden cabin. The air was sharp and cold, biting at his cheeks and hands, and a thin layer of frost clung to the fences and gates that lined his property. Winter had arrived with a force he had not expected this year. For decades, he had worked the land, tending to his cattle and caring for the ranch through harsh weather, but this storm was different. The snow had fallen steadily for days, and the wind carried a chilling howl that seemed to cut through every layer of clothing. As he trudged along the narrow path between his barns and pens, the rancher noticed the tracks in the snow. They were small, delicate, and unlike any footprints he had seen before. They moved lightly across the frozen ground, leaving a pattern that seemed almost too graceful for the harsh environment. Curious, he followed them, wondering who or what could have walked through the snow without sinking or struggling. After a few minutes, he spotted her. She was a young girl, perhaps no older than 12 or 13, walking confidently across the frozen plains. Her hair was dark and long, and it blew gently in the wind. She wore only simple, thin clothing, and yet she seemed entirely comfortable in the freezing air. Her bare feet touched the snow without hesitation, and she moved with a quiet strength that caught the rancher completely off guard. He stopped in his tracks, unsure of what to do. He had seen many people pass through the area, hunters, travelers, even a few settlers, but none of them would dare walk through snow like this without shoes or warm coats. Most would have sought shelter immediately, or at least built a fire. But this girl did neither. She seemed calm, almost serene, as if the cold was nothing more than a gentle breeze on a summer day. The rancher wanted to call out to her, but for some reason he hesitated. There was something about the way she moved, the quiet confidence in her steps that made him pause. It was as if she belonged to the snow itself, and that calling attention to her presence might break some invisible harmony. Still, curiosity got the better of him. He cleared his throat and called out, "Hey there, are you all right?" The girl stopped and turned her head slightly, her eyes meeting his. There was no fear, no surprise, only a calm understanding. She nodded gently and gave a small smile. Her voice, when she spoke, was soft but steady. "I am fine," she said. "I know how to stay warm." The rancher was amazed. How could she be fine in such freezing weather? He could feel the cold seeping through his thick coat and woolen gloves, and even standing still made his teeth chatter. And yet here she was, standing barefoot in the snow, unshaken. He stepped closer, his boots crunching loudly against the frozen ground. "Where are you going?" he asked. "Don't you need a fire? Don't you need shelter?" She shook her head. "I have shelter in the land," she said simply, "and fire is not always needed. The snow teaches you if you listen." Her words were strange to him at first, but there was a calmness in her voice that made him want to understand. He had lived all his life in this harsh country, relying on fires, warm blankets, and thick coats, but he had never considered that someone could survive in a different way, a way that seemed almost magical. The rancher decided to follow her, keeping a respectful distance. She led him through the snow-covered fields, moving with a rhythm that made it seem effortless. Her bare feet left small imprints, but she never stumbled or slowed down. He struggled to keep up, his heavy boots sinking into the snow and making every step a challenge. But she never turned back, never paused to wait for him. It was as if she knew exactly where she was going, and the land itself was guiding her steps. After a short walk, she stopped at the edge of a small grove of trees. The branches were covered in snow, and the ground beneath them was hidden under a thick blanket of white. She crouched down and began arranging branches and leaves with careful precision. The rancher watched closely, trying to understand what she was doing. Within minutes, she had created a small enclosure, a kind of natural shelter that shielded her from the wind. "This is enough," she said, as if answering his unspoken question. "It protects me from the cold. The wind cannot reach me here." The rancher was stunned. He had always relied on stoves, fires, and cabins to stay warm, and yet this young girl had made herself safe with nothing but what the land offered. He knelt down beside her, curious. "How do you do that?" he asked. "I've spent years learning to survive winter storms, and I still struggle. You seem different." She looked at him with steady eyes. "I learned from my people," she said. "We watch the land, we feel it. The snow, the wind, the trees, they all tell us what to do. You can survive if you listen. If you move with the land, it helps you." The rancher nodded slowly, trying to absorb her words. He had spent decades mastering the art of ranching, understanding cattle, weather patterns, and the changing seasons. But this was different. This was a lesson in survival that went beyond tools, beyond blankets and coats. It was about respect and understanding, about learning from the land rather than simply fighting against it. He watched as the girl carefully removed some leaves from the ground and placed them under her legs. She explained that they acted as insulation, keeping the cold from reaching her skin. Then she used small branches to form a barrier against the wind. She moved with grace and purpose, each action precise and intentional. The rancher was fascinated. He had never thought to use nature itself in this way, and he could feel a sense of wonder growing inside him. As the morning passed, the rancher began to notice other things. The girl did not shiver, her hands and feet remained warm, and her breathing was calm and steady. She explained that keeping the body moving, even slightly, helped maintain warmth. She also taught him to breathe in a certain way, slow and deliberate, to conserve energy and maintain heat. The rancher tried to follow her instructions, but it was not easy. His body was used to relying on external warmth, and the snow seemed relentless against him. But he kept trying, eager to understand. By midday, the rancher realized that he had been completely captivated by this young girl. She had arrived without warning, yet her presence had changed the way he saw the world around him. The cold that had once seemed unbearable now felt like a teacher, a challenge that could be met with knowledge and respect. He felt a strange mixture of admiration and humility. Here was a child who had survived winters far harsher than this, and she was teaching him lessons he had never learned in all his years on the ranch. The rancher decided to ask another question, one that had been on his mind since he first saw her. "Why are you here alone?" he asked. "Where is your family?" The girl paused, looking out at the snowy horizon. "I am learning," she said softly. "Sometimes you must face the land alone to understand it. My people taught me this. The cold teaches patience, observation, and strength. You will understand if you try." Her words struck the rancher deeply. He had always prided himself on his experience, but here was a child who understood lessons he had never considered. He realized that survival was not just about enduring the cold, but about understanding it, respecting it, and moving with it rather than against it. As the day wore on, the rancher and the girl continued to share knowledge. He asked questions and she answered patiently, demonstrating how to find hidden sources of warmth, how to use the snow to insulate the body, and how to read the signs of approaching storms. He tried each method, often failing at first, but with her guidance, he began to succeed. Slowly, he felt his body adapting, his mind opening to a new way of seeing the winter landscape. By late afternoon, the sun was low on the horizon, casting a golden glow across the snow. The rancher felt exhausted but invigorated. He had learned more in a few hours than he thought possible, and he could not help but feel gratitude toward the girl. She had arrived like a quiet force of nature, showing him a path he had never known existed. He realized that this encounter was only the beginning. There was much more to learn, and he was determined to follow her lessons, no matter how challenging they might be. As they prepared to leave the grove and return to the rancher's cabin, he looked at the girl with newfound respect. "Thank you," he said sincerely. "I don't know anyone else who could teach me this. You are remarkable." She smiled softly, a quiet but confident smile. "The land teaches everyone who listens," she said, "and you are ready to listen." With that, they began walking back across the snowy plains, the rancher keeping close, eager to learn more, and the girl moving with effortless grace, guiding him into a world of knowledge that went beyond anything he had ever known. That day, amidst the cold and the snow, a lesson had begun, one that would change the rancher's life forever. The next morning, the rancher woke to a sky painted in soft shades of pink and gold. The snow had settled overnight, sparkling under the first rays of sunlight. The cold still bit at the edges of the world, but something inside him had shifted. He remembered the lessons the girl had begun to teach him the day before, and a quiet determination filled his chest. Today, he would learn more, and this time, he was ready to try harder. The girl was already outside when he stepped into the crisp morning air. She had chosen a small clearing near the edge of the forest, where the wind was lighter and the snow beneath was firm. She moved with the same calm, deliberate steps as before, her bare feet leaving gentle impressions in the snow. When she noticed the rancher approaching, she gave a small nod. "We will start today," she said. "You will learn more if you follow closely and pay attention." The rancher nodded, eager to follow her guidance. His heavy boots sank into the snow, making him realize again how different their movements were. She walked lightly, almost as if she was floating over the frozen ground, while he struggled with every step. But he didn't complain. He wanted to learn, and he knew he would have to change his habits to do so. The girl began with the first lesson, understanding the land itself. She knelt down and brushed away the snow in a small patch, revealing the frozen ground beneath. "The snow tells many stories," she explained. "Where it is soft, the earth is warmer below. Where it is hard, the wind has swept it clean. You can learn where to rest, where to move, and where to find food if you watch carefully." The rancher bent closer, studying the patterns she pointed out. He had spent years watching weather and snow for practical reasons, like protecting his cattle, but he had never thought of it as a form of teaching. The girl's words opened a new way of seeing the world. Snow was no longer just cold and dangerous. It was full of information if one knew how to read it. Next, she showed him how to create small windbreaks using only what nature provided. She gathered branches from the surrounding trees and piled them carefully, creating a small barrier that would shield someone from the sharp winter wind. Then, using fallen leaves, she built a small mat that could be placed on the snow to keep the body insulated. "The land gives what you need," she said. "You just have to use it wisely." The rancher tried to follow her method, but it was not easy. His first attempts were clumsy, the branches fell over and the leaves scattered in the wind. He laughed at himself, feeling both frustrated and amused. The girl watched patiently, never scolding, only offering gentle guidance. "Move slowly," she said. "Think about what you are doing. Let the land help you." With her help, he began to succeed. Slowly, the windbreak took shape, sturdy and functional. He placed leaves on the snow to sit on, feeling warmth begin to return to his body. For the first time, he realized that survival was not only about strength or heavy clothing. It was about observation, patience, and intelligence. Once he had mastered the basics of shelter, the girl moved on to another lesson, controlling the body in the cold. She demonstrated how small movements could generate heat without exhausting energy. A slight shift of the arms, a bending of the knees, even tapping the feet in rhythm could keep the blood flowing and the body warm. The rancher followed her carefully, initially feeling awkward but gradually noticing that his body was responding. He did not shiver as much, and his hands felt warmer than they had in hours. Breathing was next. The girl instructed him to breathe slowly and deeply, focusing on controlling each inhale and exhale. At first, the rancher felt impatient. "It's just air," he thought, but he tried anyway. The effect was subtle but noticeable. His mind felt calmer and his body seemed more efficient at keeping heat. She smiled when she saw him catching on. "The mind is as important as the body," she said. "Do not forget it." After several hours, the girl led him further into the forest, showing him how to find food even in the harsh winter. She pointed out edible roots, berries hidden under snow, and signs of small animals moving nearby. She taught him how to follow tracks without frightening the creatures, and how to use what the land provided without taking too much. The rancher marveled at her skill. He had grown up hunting and gathering to some extent, but her knowledge was instinctive, almost magical in its simplicity and effectiveness. Throughout the morning, the rancher began to notice subtle changes in himself. He was less focused on his own discomfort and more attentive to the world around him. The wind, the snow, the trees, all seemed to communicate in ways he had never understood before. He realized that survival was not a battle against nature, but a collaboration with it. The girl's quiet strength and confidence inspired him, and he felt a growing sense of respect and admiration. As midday approached, the girl taught him another crucial skill: finding warmth without fire. She dug a shallow hole in the snow and lined it with leaves, creating a small, insulated area. Then she demonstrated how to curl up inside it, keeping the body compact while trapping heat. The rancher followed her instructions, feeling the difference immediately. For hours, he had struggled to stay warm despite heavy clothing, but this simple method made him feel surprisingly comfortable. He began to understand that warmth was not only physical, but also mental. Patience, attention, and understanding of the environment were just as important as any blanket or coat. While they rested, the girl shared stories of her people, describing how they had lived for generations in harmony with the land. She spoke of their respect for animals, the changing seasons, and the spirits of the earth. The rancher listened intently, fascinated by her words. Her stories were filled with lessons, not just about survival but about life itself. He realized that the knowledge she shared was not only practical but deeply meaningful, connecting the human spirit with the natural world. In the afternoon, the girl taught him how to move through the snow efficiently. She showed him how to step lightly, distribute weight evenly, and avoid sinking too deeply. She also demonstrated how to walk without exhausting energy, using the momentum of each step to keep moving forward. The rancher tried to mimic her movements, initially stumbling and sinking, but with patience and repetition, he began to improve. He felt a sense of accomplishment, realizing that he could adapt to the harsh environment if he was willing to learn. The girl also taught him about observing the signs of weather. She pointed out subtle changes in the wind, the way snow accumulated in certain areas, and the patterns of clouds in the sky. She explained how these signs could predict storms or indicate safer paths to take. The rancher was amazed. He had relied on weather forecasts and experience, but her method was intuitive, precise, and deeply connected to the land itself. He realized that he had been seeing the world in pieces, but she was seeing it as a whole, and there was much wisdom in that perspective. As the day drew to a close, the rancher and the girl returned to the small grove where she had first built her shelter. He felt tired but exhilarated, filled with a sense of accomplishment he had not experienced in years. He had learned more in one day than he thought possible, and he knew that tomorrow would bring even more lessons. The snow, which had once seemed like a harsh enemy, now felt like a teacher, guiding him toward understanding and strength. Before parting for the evening, the girl gave him one final piece of advice. "Do not fear the cold," she said softly. "Do not fight it. Learn from it, move with it, and it will protect you as much as it challenges you." The rancher nodded, feeling the truth of her words deep in his bones. He had spent so long seeing winter as an obstacle, but now he understood that it could be a teacher, and he was ready to learn all it had to offer. As he prepared to sleep in the small cabin that night, he thought about the girl's lessons. He realized that survival was not just about fire, clothing, or food. It was about knowledge, patience, and respect. He felt a growing gratitude for her guidance and a quiet excitement for the days to come. Tomorrow, he would learn more. Tomorrow, he would begin to truly understand the ways of the land. And as he drifted into sleep, the rancher knew that the girl had already begun to change his life. He could feel it in the way he moved, the way he thought, and the way he understood the world around him. Her lessons were only beginning, and he was eager to follow them wherever they might lead. The days that followed were unlike any the rancher had ever experienced. Each morning, he rose before the sun, eager to meet the young Apache girl in the snow-covered fields. The cold no longer felt like an enemy, though it still demanded respect. Instead, it was a teacher, guiding him, shaping him, and revealing lessons he had never imagined. The girl led him through a world of quiet wonders, showing him the secrets hidden beneath the frozen landscape. This morning, the rancher noticed a change in himself. He moved more lightly through the snow, following her footsteps without the heavy, clumsy movements that had marked his first attempts. He was no longer constantly shivering. His body was adapting, learning to generate warmth from motion and breath. He began to see the patterns in the snow, how the wind shaped drifts, and how certain trees offered shelter better than any cabin he had ever built. The girl watched him silently, her eyes gentle but alert, ready to correct or guide when necessary. She led him to a small stream partially frozen, where the water still flowed beneath the ice. "Water is life," she said simply. "Even in the coldest winter, it is always moving somewhere. You must know where to find it and how to use it without wasting energy." The rancher crouched by the edge of the stream, watching how she carefully broke small openings in the ice to drink. She taught him how to cup his hands, scoop the water, and sip slowly to avoid losing warmth. It was a simple act, yet it felt like a revelation. Even water, something he had taken for granted all his life, became part of the lessons of survival. After drinking, she guided him to a grove of pine trees. "The trees give many things," she explained. She showed him how to collect dry needles for insulation, how to use fallen branches to form a protective barrier, and how to identify signs of animal movement. The rancher followed her instructions, noticing how much he had been missing before. Every rustle of the wind, every crackle of ice beneath his boots, every pattern in the snow told a story, and she had taught him to read it. The morning passed in a rhythm of learning. She demonstrated how to gather small amounts of food, roots, nuts, and bark that could sustain him if he were stranded. She taught him to move silently, respecting the land and the creatures that lived there. She explained that survival was not just about enduring the cold, but about understanding the balance of life around him. "Take only what you need," she said. "The land provides, but only if you respect it." By midday, the rancher felt a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. Each lesson required focus, patience, and effort, yet he felt alive in a way he had not in years. The snow, once a harsh challenge, now felt like a partner. He could see its lessons in patterns, in hidden warmth, in the way it covered the ground yet revealed life beneath. The girl's guidance was like a bridge between his old ways and a new understanding of the world. As they rested, she taught him something he had never considered: mental strength. "The mind is as important as the body," she said. "Fear and impatience will freeze you faster than the cold. You must stay calm, even when the wind bites and the snow is deep." The rancher listened, thinking about how often he had panicked or grown frustrated in storms. He realized that her lessons were not just practical, but spiritual in their depth. Surviving winter was as much about controlling thoughts as controlling movements. She then introduced a new challenge. She pointed to a steep slope covered in fresh snow. "We will climb it," she said. "The land is a teacher. It will test your strength, your balance, and your attention." The rancher felt hesitation. The slope was slippery, and he knew that one wrong step could send him tumbling. But the girl moved effortlessly, her bare feet finding purchase in the snow, her body balanced and sure. He watched her, trying to absorb every movement, every subtle shift of weight, every careful placement of a foot. He began the climb, stumbling at first, his heavy boots slipping against the icy surface. She called out instructions, gentle but firm. Shift your weight slowly, use your arms, watch the snow, feel the land. Step by step he improved, feeling his confidence grow. By the time he reached the top, he was tired, but a quiet pride filled him. He had moved beyond fear, learning to trust both his body and the lessons she had shared. From the summit, the rancher could see the vast expanse of snow-covered plains stretching to the horizon. The wind was stronger up there and the cold was sharper, but he no longer felt powerless. He felt prepared, aware, and connected to the world around him. The girl stood beside him, her expression calm and knowing. "You are learning," she said simply. "Each step teaches you more than the last. Remember this." The descent was even more instructive. She showed him how to slide carefully down snowy slopes without losing control, how to land softly, and how to maintain balance while conserving energy. The rancher practiced over and over until he felt confident. Each movement was no longer a struggle, but a conversation with the land. He began to understand that survival was about observation, adaptation, and respect, not brute force. Later, they moved to a small hollow, where the girl demonstrated how to create temporary shelters that could protect them from wind and snow. She explained how to layer branches and leaves, how to insulate the ground, and how to position the body to retain heat. The rancher tried, initially fumbling, but under her patient guidance, he succeeded. He felt a sense of accomplishment, realizing that he could combine his own knowledge with hers to survive even the harshest conditions. As the day went on, they practiced another skill, reading the signs of approaching weather. She pointed out subtle changes in the sky, the direction of the wind, and the patterns of snow accumulation. "The land speaks," she said. "You must listen. It tells you where to go, what to do, and when to act." The rancher had spent years observing storms and weather patterns, but her approach was different. It was intuitive, precise, and deeply connected to the rhythm of nature. He realized that he had been seeing pieces of the world, but she saw the whole. By late afternoon, the rancher felt a growing sense of respect, not only for her knowledge, but for the courage it took to live in such harmony with nature. She was small, young, and alone in a harsh winter landscape, yet she moved with confidence and grace. He had relied on tools, fire, and shelter his whole life, but she had none of those comforts and she thrived. Her strength was quiet, steady, and inspiring. During a brief rest, she shared stories of her ancestors, explaining how they had survived generations of harsh winters. She spoke of lessons passed down through observation, patience, and respect for the land. The rancher listened with fascination, realizing that her teachings were not just about surviving the cold, they were about understanding life itself. Each story carried wisdom, each lesson a connection between humans and the world around them. As the sun began to sink toward the horizon, the rancher felt the day's learning settle into his mind and body. His muscles were tired, but he felt more capable than ever before. He realized that the girl had not only taught him physical survival, but also how to observe, adapt, and respect the natural world. He had begun to see patterns, anticipate changes, and understand the subtle signals that the land offered. Before they returned to the grove where she slept, the girl gave him another piece of advice. "Trust yourself," she said softly. "You have learned much, but the land will test you. You must remember the lessons and use them wisely. Do not fear mistakes, they teach more than success." The rancher nodded, understanding that survival was a journey, not a single achievement. Each day brought new challenges, new lessons, and new opportunities to grow stronger and wiser. That night, as he prepared to sleep in his cabin, the rancher reflected on the day. He had learned about shelter, movement, observation, and patience. He had seen the land through new eyes, guided by the wisdom of a child who understood it better than anyone he had ever met. He felt grateful, inspired, and ready for the days ahead. He realized that this journey was transforming him. He was no longer just a rancher struggling against winter. He was a student of the land, learning to live in harmony with it. And he knew that the lessons were only beginning. With each day, the Apache girl would guide him further, teaching him skills that would stay with him for a lifetime. He fell asleep with a sense of calm and excitement, eager for the challenges and discoveries that tomorrow would bring. The morning began with an unusual quiet over the snow-covered plains. The wind, which usually whistled sharply through the trees and across the rancher's fields, was eerily still. The sun rose behind heavy clouds, casting a dim, gray light over the landscape. The rancher noticed the change immediately. The air felt heavier, colder, and the snow seemed more brittle underfoot. He had learned to read these signs in the past days, and instinctively, he knew that the weather was preparing to challenge them in ways they had not yet faced. The Apache girl, however, moved as if nothing was unusual. She led him toward a small hollow in the woods, her bare feet sinking lightly into the fresh snow. "A storm is coming," she said calmly. "You must be ready. Everything we have practiced will be tested today." The rancher felt a knot of tension in his stomach. He had survived winter storms before, relying on his cabin, thick coats, and fire, but he knew that this time he would need to trust the lessons she had been teaching him. They reached the hollow, a natural depression between a cluster of trees. The girl began immediately to prepare, gathering branches, leaves, and pine needles. She worked swiftly but carefully, showing the rancher how to layer materials to create insulation against the wind and snow. He followed, fumbling at first, but with her guidance, he began to understand the importance of structure, placement, and attention to detail. The storm was approaching and every action mattered. Once the shelter was prepared, the girl taught him how to position their bodies to conserve heat. "Curl like this," she said, demonstrating, "and keep your arms close. Your body will protect itself. Move only when necessary." The rancher imitated her as best he could, feeling the cold air pressing against his face and hands. For the first time, he realized that warmth was not just about clothing or fire. It was about body position, breathing, and subtle movement. As the wind began to rise, snowflakes swirling in the gray air, the girl instructed him to focus on his breathing. "Slow and steady," she said. "Do not panic. The cold is powerful, but your mind is stronger if you control it." He closed his eyes briefly, inhaling slowly and exhaling deliberately as she had taught him. The effect was immediate. His heart rate slowed, his muscles relaxed, and the biting cold seemed more bearable. He had learned to use his mind as much as his body to survive, and now the lesson was being tested in real time. Hours passed, and the storm intensified. The wind whipped snow across the hollow, reducing visibility and creating a blinding white curtain. The rancher felt the full force of the winter, but he remembered her guidance: stay calm, conserve energy, and trust the land. He moved slowly, adjusting his position, shifting slightly to keep warmth circulating. Every action was deliberate, every decision critical. He had never experienced such a powerful combination of fear, respect, and focus in his life. The girl demonstrated how to use the snow itself to provide additional insulation. She packed loose snow around the shelter, forming a barrier against the wind, and even created a small roof of branches weighted with snow to block the cold from above. The rancher followed her example, realizing that the snow was not his enemy. It was a tool, a material to be shaped and understood. For the first time, he saw winter as an ally rather than a threat. During a brief pause in the storm, she pointed out subtle signs in the environment. "See the way the snow drifts," she asked. "The wind leaves clues. You can find the safest paths, the warmest spots, if you know how to read them." He observed carefully, noticing the small dips and rises, the patterns where trees offered natural protection, and the areas where snow had been swept away by the wind. Every detail mattered, and he felt a growing respect for her knowledge and instincts. As the storm raged on, the rancher faced moments of doubt and fear. He had been cold for hours, his body aching from staying in one position, and yet he was still alive, still warm enough to continue. He glanced at the girl, noticing how calm she remained, her focus unwavering despite the blizzard around them. She was a living example of resilience and adaptation, and he drew strength from her presence. The storm continued into the afternoon. Visibility was almost zero, and the wind howled with a force that made it difficult to hear even his own thoughts. The rancher remembered the lessons she had given him about conserving energy, reading the land, and maintaining mental focus. He shifted slightly to trap more heat, adjusted his breathing, and observed the snow patterns outside their shelter. Slowly, methodically, he realized that he was surviving not just by following instructions, but by applying the lessons to his own understanding. He was learning to trust his instincts, guided by knowledge and experience. The girl then taught him a subtle but important skill: how to use small movements to generate heat without exhausting energy. She demonstrated tapping his feet in rhythm, flexing fingers inside mittens, and moving arms slowly without disturbing the shelter. The rancher followed, feeling warmth slowly return to his limbs. He had always believed that survival meant constant struggle, but now he saw that patience, careful attention, and subtlety could be even more effective. By evening, the storm showed no signs of slowing. The rancher was exhausted, but he also felt an unusual sense of calm. He had faced the elements, applied the lessons, and endured. The blizzard was a test, and he had survived, not through brute strength or stubbornness, but through learning, observation, and trust in the knowledge the girl had shared. He realized that the harshest conditions often teach the deepest lessons. As the sky darkened, the girl instructed him to prepare for the night. They reinforced the shelter with additional branches, layered more leaves for insulation, and dug a shallow depression in the snow to trap warmth around their bodies. The rancher followed carefully, noticing that each action made a difference. He had once thought survival meant constant struggle, but now he understood that preparation, understanding, and careful attention were equally powerful tools. Throughout the night, the wind continued to roar, snow piling against the shelter, but the rancher felt secure. He had learned to trust his instincts, the land, and the lessons of the girl. Each hour of the blizzard reinforced the knowledge that survival was not about avoiding danger. It was about facing it wisely. He observed the subtle shifts in temperature, listened to the sounds of the wind, and felt the snow under his body, all while remaining calm and focused. In the early hours of the morning, the storm began to ease. The wind slowed, and the snow settled into a quiet, sparkling blanket. The rancher looked at the girl, noticing how her calm presence had guided him through the most difficult challenge he had yet faced. He felt a deep gratitude, realizing that her teachings were not just about survival, but about courage, patience, and respect for the world around him. She turned to him, her expression calm but proud. "You have learned well," she said. "The storm tests everyone, but you have listened, observed, and acted wisely. You understand now that fear is a tool, not a weakness, and that patience is stronger than force." The rancher nodded, feeling a sense of accomplishment and humility. He had faced the storm and emerged stronger, not just in body but in mind and spirit. By the time the sun rose, casting a soft glow over the snow, the rancher felt transformed. The storm had been fierce, but it had taught him more than any previous winter. He had applied the lessons of the girl under real pressure, testing his endurance, focus, and understanding. He realized that survival was not simply a matter of tools or strength. It was knowledge, patience, and harmony with the land. As they packed their shelter and prepared to return to the rancher's cabin, he looked at the girl with newfound respect. She had guided him through a trial that would have overwhelmed most people, yet she remained calm, composed, and wise. He knew that her lessons would stay with him for the rest of his life, shaping the way he approached the land, the cold, and even challenges beyond survival. That day, the rancher learned that true resilience was not about fighting the elements, but about understanding them. The blizzard had tested his skills, his patience, and his courage, and he had passed because he had trusted the guidance of someone who had lived in harmony with the land. He felt a quiet pride, a deep respect, and an eagerness to continue learning. The storm had ended, but the lessons would last forever. The morning after the storm dawned clear and bright. The snow glistened like countless tiny diamonds, and the air, though still cold, felt fresh and calm. The rancher stepped outside, taking a deep breath and feeling a sense of quiet pride. The blizzard of the previous day had tested him in ways he had never imagined, and he had survived, not just through luck, but through knowledge, patience, and the lessons of the young Apache girl. He looked around at the snow-covered fields and forests, seeing patterns and paths that would have been invisible to him a week ago. The land felt alive, teaching and guiding him. The girl was already outside, her bare feet moving lightly across the snow. She had a quiet energy about her, a calm strength that seemed to flow with the wind and the light. When she noticed the rancher approaching, she gave him a small smile. "Today," she said softly, "we will continue, but in a different way. The storm has taught you much, but there is more to understand." He nodded, eager to learn. He had already come a long way, yet he sensed that her teachings were not just about surviving winter. They were about seeing the world differently, about finding harmony in a place that could be harsh and unforgiving. He had learned to move through the snow with balance, to conserve warmth, to read the land, and to remain calm in the most challenging conditions. Yet he knew there was more wisdom to gain, more lessons hidden in the quiet of the plains. She led him to a ridge overlooking the rancher's property. From this vantage point, he could see the expanse of his land, the pens and barns, the frozen stream, the snow-covered plains stretching to the horizon. The girl gestured toward the distant hills. "The land teaches every day," she said. "It is not only the storms that challenge you. Observation, patience, and care are always required. You must watch, listen, and respect what is around you." They spent the morning walking slowly across the ridge, observing the tracks of animals in the snow, the way the wind shaped drifts, and the subtle signs of life beneath the frozen surface. She showed him how to follow these signs to find food, water, and shelter, how to anticipate changes in the weather, and how to adjust movements to maintain warmth and conserve energy. The rancher realized that her teachings were preparing him not just for survival, but for understanding life itself. After a while, they returned to the small grove where she had first taught him. She instructed him to reinforce the shelter one last time, not for a storm but as practice. He gathered branches, layered leaves, and packed snow carefully, recalling every lesson from the blizzard. He realized that the work was not just about building a physical shelter, it was about discipline, awareness, and respect for the land. When he finished, the girl nodded approvingly. "You have learned well," she said. "The land will always provide, but only to those who listen and respect it." The rancher felt a deep gratitude for her guidance. He thought about the storm, the lessons, and the quiet strength of the girl. Her teachings had transformed him. He now understood that survival was about more than fire, clothing, or shelter. It was about knowledge, patience, and harmony with the natural world. He realized that he had grown stronger, wiser, and more capable than he had ever been before. As they rested in the grove, the girl shared more stories of her people, explaining how they had lived in balance with the land for generations. She spoke of respect for animals, understanding the seasons, and listening to the world around them. Each story carried a lesson, a way to see life beyond the immediate struggle for survival. The rancher listened intently, absorbing her words like water in dry soil. He realized that her knowledge was not just practical, it was a philosophy, a way to live fully in harmony with nature. By midday, the rancher felt a quiet determination. He had learned much, but he knew that the lessons would only truly take root if he applied them in his daily life. He decided to integrate what he had learned into the routines of his ranch. He would teach his family and workers to observe the land, to conserve warmth, to read signs in the snow, and to respect the balance of life around them. He felt a sense of responsibility to carry forward the wisdom he had gained from the girl, sharing it so that it would continue to benefit others. As the afternoon sun began to sink, casting long shadows across the snow, the rancher noticed that the girl was preparing to leave. She gathered her few belongings, her movements quiet and deliberate. He felt a pang of sadness. In the short time she had been in his life, she had transformed him completely. Yet he also understood that this was part of the lesson. The knowledge she shared was meant to be carried forward, not kept confined to one place. "Will I see you again?" he asked softly, trying to hide the mixture of gratitude and sadness in his voice. The girl looked at him calmly, her eyes filled with quiet wisdom. "Perhaps," she said, "but the lessons remain. You have learned to listen, to observe, and to respect. That knowledge will stay with you even if I am not here." She smiled gently. "Use it wisely, teach others. Live with the land and it will sustain you." The rancher nodded, feeling the truth of her words in his heart. He realized that the most important lessons were not the physical skills she had taught, but the understanding, respect, and patience that accompanied them. Her departure would be difficult, but the wisdom she had shared would guide him for the rest of his life. As the girl disappeared into the distant hills, moving as lightly and confidently as she had appeared, the rancher stood in the snow, feeling both humbled and inspired. He knew that he would never forget her, the lessons she had taught, or the way she had transformed his understanding of survival and life. The snow-covered plains, once a harsh and unyielding challenge, now felt like a place of learning, growth, and possibility. The days that followed were filled with new routines and discoveries. The rancher applied the lessons she had taught him to his daily work on the ranch. He observed the land more carefully, noticing signs in the snow, the wind, and the trees that guided his decisions. He adjusted his movements, conserved energy, and applied his understanding of warmth and shelter to himself and those around him. The cattle seemed to thrive under his attentive care, and his workers noticed a new calm and confidence in his approach. Over time, he began teaching others what he had learned. He showed his family how to read the land, how to build simple shelters, and how to conserve warmth during harsh winter days. He shared the mental strategies she had taught him, emphasizing calm, observation, and patience. Slowly, the knowledge spread, becoming part of the culture of the ranch. The girl's teachings had taken root in a way that would endure far beyond her brief presence. The rancher also began to see the broader impact of her lessons. He noticed how patience and observation improved not only survival skills, but also relationships with the land, animals, and people. He realized that living in harmony with nature brought a sense of peace and balance that had been missing in his life. He felt gratitude every time he walked across the snow-covered fields, remembering the young Apache girl who had changed everything. Even in the quiet moments, he reflected on her words, "The land teaches. You must listen." He carried these lessons with him in every action, from caring for his cattle to tending his fields, from walking across the snow to preparing for storms. The wisdom she had shared became a guiding principle, shaping his approach to life in ways he had never imagined. Years later, when the rancher looked back on that winter, he remembered it not as a time of hardship, but as a season of transformation. He remembered the blizzard that had tested him, the lessons of patience, observation, and resilience, and the quiet, unwavering presence of the girl who had taught him to survive and to thrive. Her guidance had left an indelible mark, shaping the man he had become and the way he lived in harmony with the land. Though he never saw her again, he often thought of her while walking through the snow, tending his cattle, or observing the patterns of wind and weather. Her teachings had become a part of him, a permanent connection to a wisdom older than any storm, older than the ranch itself. He realized that true survival was not just enduring hardship, but understanding, respecting, and learning from the world around you. And so, the rancher lived the rest of his days with a sense of gratitude and awareness that he had never known before. He taught others, applied the lessons to his own life, and carried the spirit of the Apache girl in every step he took across the snow, in every decision he made, and in every moment he spent in the quiet, beautiful, and sometimes harsh world that had become his teacher. Her impact remained, a guiding light in the cold, a reminder that courage, knowledge, and respect for the land could carry a person through even the harshest winters and beyond.